The sound of gunfire echoed behind her as Penelope Wallace's bare feet hit the scorching desert sand, each step sending jolts of agony through her body. As the July sun beat down mercilessly on the Nevada wasteland in the summer of 1887. She had kicked off her dancing shoes 3 miles back when they became more hindrance than help, and now her feet were leaving bloody prints across the hard-packed earth as she ran for her life from the men who had murdered her employer and burned down the saloon where she had worked as a piano player. Her lungs burned as she gasped for air in the 100-degree heat, her throat parched and swollen. The simple cotton dress she wore clung to her back with sweat, and her long auburn hair had come loose from its pins, whipping around her face as she stumbled forward. She could hear the thunder of horses behind her, the whooping and hollering of the 3 outlaws who had decided she had seen too much when they robbed the establishment and shot old Samuel in cold blood. Penelope had been 22 years old for exactly 1 week, and she was going to die in this God-forsaken desert before she ever got to see San Francisco like she had always dreamed. Her foot caught on a rock, and she went down hard, scraping her palms and knees. She scrambled to get up, but her body was shutting down from heat exhaustion and terror. This was it. This was how her story ended. She rolled onto her back, squinting up at the merciless blue sky, waiting for the bullets to find her. Instead, she heard a different sound. A single horse, moving fast, coming from a different direction. Then the crack of a rifle and shouting. More gunfire. Penelope managed to push herself up on her elbows, her vision swimming as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Through the heat shimmer rising from the desert floor, she saw a lone rider engaged with her 3 pursuers. The newcomer sat tall in his saddle, working his rifle with practiced efficiency, and even through her delirium, Penelope could see he was good. Very good. 2 of the outlaws wheeled their horses and took off at a gallop, deciding 3 against 1 were not odds they liked when the one could shoot like that. The 3rd man was slower to react, and the stranger's next shot took him in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his saddle with a scream. The wounded outlaw managed to catch his horse and hauled himself back up with his good arm, then spurred the animal into a run, following his companions toward the horizon. The rider turned his horse and came toward Penelope at a canter. She tried to focus on his face, but the world was tilting sideways. She was dimly aware of him dismounting, of boots crunching on sand and gravel, and then strong hands were lifting her into the shade of his horse's body. Easy now, easy. His voice was deep and steady, with a slight Texas drawl that reminded her of her father. "You are burning up. When did you last have water?" Penelope tried to answer, but her tongue felt like leather in her mouth. She watched through half-closed eyes as the stranger pulled a canteen from his saddle and uncorked it. He lifted her head gently and brought it to her lips. "Small sips," he instructed. "Too much too fast and you will just bring it back up." The water was the most glorious thing Penelope had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down to drain the whole canteen, but the stranger controlled the flow, giving her just enough to wet her mouth and throat. After a few moments, he pulled it away despite her weak protest. "More in a minute," he promised. "Let that settle first." Penelope's vision was starting to clear, and she got her first real look at her rescuer. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes so blue they almost matched the desert sky. His face was sun-bronzed and handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a chambray shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. A tin star was pinned to his vest. "You are a lawman," she croaked out. "Deputy Marshal Xavier, right out of Carson City," he confirmed. I've been tracking those three for 2 weeks. They robbed a stagecoach near Virginia City and killed the driver. When I saw them chasing you, I figured they had found new trouble to get into." His eyes swept over her torn dress and bloody feet, and his jaw tightened. "What did they do?" "They robbed the Silver Dollar in Rhyolite last night. Shot the owner. I was playing piano during the robbery. I saw their faces, so they decided I could not be left alive to identify them." The words came easier now that moisture had returned to her mouth. "I ran. I have been running since dawn." Xavier's expression darkened. "Samuel Thompson is dead. You knew him. He was a good man. Gave me a meal and a place to sleep more than once when I was passing through." Xavier was quiet for a moment, then seemed to shake himself. "We can talk more later. Right now, I need to get you out of this sun, and those feet need tending." He stood and moved to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes. Penelope watched as he untied his bedroll and spread the blanket on the ground, creating a larger patch of shade. Then he came back for her, lifting her easily and carrying her to the makeshift shelter. His arms were solid and strong, and Penelope felt the strangest sense of safety despite everything that had just happened. Xavier knelt beside her and gave her more water, letting her drink longer this time. Then he looked at her feet and let out a low whistle. "These are torn up pretty bad. I have some salve and bandages in my saddlebag, but you are going to need proper doctoring." "There is no doctor in Rhyolite," Penelope said. "The closest one is in Beatty, 15 miles west. Then that is where we are headed." Xavier retrieved his supplies and began cleaning her feet with surprising gentleness for such a rough-looking man. Penelope hissed at the sting but held still. "I am going to be straight with you, Miss Wallace. Penelope Wallace. Miss Wallace. You cannot walk on these feet, not for days at least. And we are a good 8 miles from Rhyolite, probably 10 from Beatty. I am going to have to put you on my horse." Penelope looked at the animal, then back at Xavier. "What about you? I will walk alongside. Buck here can carry 2, but not in this heat and not for that distance. He has already covered a lot of ground today chasing those bastards." Xavier finished wrapping her feet in clean bandages, then sat back on his heels. "But before we go anywhere, I need you to drink more and you need to cool down. Your skin is like fire." He took his bandana and wet it from the canteen, then pressed it to her forehead and cheeks. The coolness made Penelope sigh with relief. Xavier repeated the process several times, then had her drink more water. She studied his face as he worked, noting the care in his movements, the concern in his eyes. This was not a man who did things halfway. This was someone who, when he decided to help, gave it everything he had. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. "You could have just gone after them and let me take my chances." Xavier met her eyes and something flickered in that blue gaze. "That is not the kind of man I am, Miss Wallace. Never has been, never will be." Something warm unfurled in Penelope's chest, something that had nothing to do with the desert heat. After another 15 minutes of rest and water, Xavier deemed her ready to travel. The problem was her feet were too swollen and damaged for her to wear shoes, even if she had any. Xavier looked at his own scuffed boots, then down at his feet, then back at Penelope's bandaged ones. "Your feet are smaller than mine, but not by much," he said thoughtfully. "And boots have more room than regular shoes. If I wrap your bandages thick enough, my boots might actually work." "I cannot take your boots," Penelope protested. "You said you would be walking. And I have thick socks, plus the ground is not quite as hot now that the sun is starting to drop. You, on the other hand, need something to protect those feet once you are in the saddle, keep the stirrups from rubbing." He was already pulling off his boots as he spoke. "Besides, I have walked barefoot before. I will survive." Before Penelope could argue further, Xavier was adding extra wrapping to her bandages, building them up until her feet looked enormous. Then he slipped his boots onto her feet. They were huge on her, even with the extra padding, but when he laced them tight, they stayed on. The leather was worn and soft from years of use, still warm from his body, and Penelope felt strangely intimate wearing them, as if she were carrying a piece of him with her. "How does that feel?" Xavier asked, strange but secure. She wiggled her toes experimentally. "Thank you, Marshal Wright." "It is just Xavier. I have never been much for formality." He smiled at her then, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish, and Penelope felt her breath catch. "Now let us get you up on Buck before we lose any more daylight." Xavier lifted her onto the saddle with ease, settling her feet carefully into the stirrups. His boots felt odd and heavy on her feet, but they would do the job. Buck, the buckskin horse, turned his head to look at his new rider with what Penelope could have sworn was curiosity. "He is gentle," Xavier said, handing her the reins. "Just give him his head and he will follow along with me. He has carried worse cargo than a pretty piano player." Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. Xavier gathered Buck's lead rope and started walking, his sock-covered feet moving carefully over the rough ground. They headed southwest, toward Beatty and its doctor. For the first hour, they traveled in relative silence. Penelope was still recovering from her ordeal, and Xavier seemed content to focus on walking and watching the horizon for any sign of the outlaws returning. But as her strength returned and the immediate danger seemed to fade, Penelope found herself wanting to know more about the man who had saved her life. "Have you been a marshal long?" she asked. Xavier glanced up at her. "5 years now. Started as a local deputy in Amarillo, Texas, then moved up to territorial work when I headed west. I like it better out here. More space, fewer politics. You are from Texas originally, born and raised." "My pa had a small ranch outside Amarillo, cattle and horses mostly." There was a pause, then he added, "He died when I was 19. Raiders hit the ranch, stole the horses, burned the barn. Pa tried to stop them and got shot for his trouble." "I am so sorry," Penelope said quietly. "It was a long time ago." "My ma had already passed when I was 12, so after Pa died, I sold what was left and headed west. Figured I would try my hand at being on the right side of the law since I had seen enough of what the wrong side could do." Xavier adjusted his grip on the lead rope. "What about you? How does a young woman end up playing piano in a Nevada saloon?" Penelope looked out at the endless expanse of desert, remembering. "My father was a music teacher in St. Louis. He taught me to play when I was 6 years old. I was going to be a concert pianist, perform in all the great halls." She smiled sadly. "Then my parents both died in a cholera outbreak 4 years ago. I was 18, alone, with no money and no family. A friend of my father's helped me get a job playing in a restaurant, but the pay was terrible. When I heard there was work out west, good pay for entertainers in the mining towns, I took a chance. Do you regret it?" "I did not until yesterday. I have been in Rhyolite for 2 years. The silver dollar was not fancy, but it was respectable. Samuel made sure of that. No one bothered me, and I got to play music every night. It was not Carnegie Hall, but it was honest work." She looked down at Xavier. "Now Samuel is dead, the saloon is burned, and I have nothing again." "You have your life," Xavier pointed out. "That is not nothing." "No," Penelope agreed. "Thanks to you, I have that." They fell quiet again, but it was a comfortable silence now. The sun was sinking lower, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. The temperature was dropping, though it was still warm. Penelope found her eyes drawn to Xavier as he walked, noting the confident set of his shoulders, the easy way he moved despite being in his socks on rough ground. He was different from the men she had known in St. Louis or even in Rhyolite. There was a solidness to him, a reliability that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. They stopped once more before full dark, making camp in a small depression that offered some protection from the wind. Xavier had dried beef and hardtack in his saddlebags, which he shared with Penelope along with more water. He built a small fire and made coffee in a battered tin pot, and the smell alone was almost as restorative as the drink itself. "We will rest here until dawn," Xavier said, pouring coffee into a spare tin cup for her. "Your body needs time to recover, and I would rather approach Beatty in daylight anyway. Those three might have circled back, or there might be more of their gang around." "How many are in the gang?" Penelope asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "At least 6 that I know of. The 3 who were chasing you are the Burns brothers, Charlie, Frank, and Pete, mean as snakes, all of them. Their leader is a man named Jack Delaney, and he is worse than all 3 of them combined. If he hears about what happened today, he will come looking for revenge." A chill ran through Penelope despite the warmth of the fire. "Do you think he will?" "Depends on how loyal the Burns brothers are feeling and whether they think one woman is worth the trouble." Xavier's eyes were serious in the firelight. "But I will not lie to you, Miss Wallace. You are in danger as long as those men are free. You are a witness to murder and robbery, and men like that do not leave loose ends if they can help it." "What do I do?" "First, we get your feet looked at. Then we get you somewhere safe while I finish what I started and track down the Delaney gang." Xavier paused. "Do you have anywhere to go? Family, friends?" Penelope shook her head. "No family. I had friends in Rhyolite, but I do not know if it is safe to go back there now." "It is not," Xavier said firmly. "Beatty would be better, at least for a while. It is bigger, has more law presence. Or you could go further west, maybe to Carson City or even San Francisco if you have the means." "I have about $30 saved," Penelope said. "It was hidden in my room at the boarding house. If it is still there, and if the boarding house itself is still standing. We can check when we circle back through Rhyolite tomorrow. I need to investigate the robbery anyway, file a proper report." Xavier sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim of the cup. "After that, I will make sure you get somewhere safe before I go after the gang. I give you my word on that." "You do not owe me anything," Penelope said. "You already saved my life. Maybe I want to do more than the bare minimum." Xavier's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You have been dealt a hard hand, Miss Wallace. If I can help make it a little easier, well, that is what I am going to do." Their eyes met across the fire, and Penelope felt that warmth in her chest again, stronger this time. She barely knew this man, but something about him called to her in a way she could not quite explain. Maybe it was just gratitude or the vulnerability of her situation, but it felt like more than that. It felt like recognition, as if some part of her soul had been waiting for Xavier Wright to come riding out of the desert. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams. Xavier told her about his years as a lawman, the good arrests and the bad ones, the satisfaction of bringing justice and the frustration when criminals slipped through his fingers. Penelope told him about her music, the pieces she loved to play, the composers who moved her to tears. She talked about her parents and her childhood in St. Louis, the life she had lost and the new one she was trying to build. At some point, exhaustion finally claimed Penelope. She did not even realize she was falling asleep until she jerked awake, nearly spilling her long, cold coffee. "Easy," Xavier said. He was spreading out his bedroll near the fire. "You should sleep. You need it more than anything right now." "Where will you sleep?" "I will keep watch. Someone needs to, and you have been through enough." When Penelope started to protest, he held up a hand. I've gone longer without sleep, trust me. Besides, I can doze in the saddle tomorrow if I need to. You are injured. The bedroll is yours." Too tired to argue, Penelope let him help her to the bedroll. He settled her carefully, making sure her feet were elevated and comfortable. Then he draped his coat over her like a blanket. "Will you not be cold?" she asked sleepily. "I will be fine. Sleep now." Penelope closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of leather and sage that clung to Xavier's coat. She felt protected, cherished even, and it had been so long since anyone had cared for her this way. Just before sleep took her completely, she felt the lightest touch on her hair, as if Xavier had brushed a strand back from her face. It might have been her imagination, but she did not think so. When she woke, dawn was breaking over the desert in streaks of pink and gold. Xavier was adding wood to the fire, his movements quiet and efficient. He had pulled his boots back on his own feet, she noticed. "Good morning," he said when he saw her eyes open. "How do you feel?" "Better." Penelope sat up carefully, testing her feet. They still hurt, but the pain was less sharp now, more of a dull ache. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little." "Enough." He handed her more water and the last of the hardtack. "We will head out as soon as you have eaten. With luck, we will reach Beatty by mid-morning." The journey resumed much as it had the day before, with Penelope on Buck and Xavier walking alongside. But the atmosphere was different now, more relaxed and companionable. They talked easily, comfortable silences interspersed with conversation. Penelope found herself watching Xavier more openly, admiring the way the morning light caught in his dark hair, the strength in his hands as he held the lead rope. She wondered what it would be like to have those hands hold her, not just in rescue but in tenderness. The thought made her blush, and she quickly looked away, trying to focus on the landscape instead. But her mind kept drifting back to Xavier, to the care he had shown her, to the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. There was something there, some spark of connection that seemed to grow stronger with every passing hour. They reached Beatty just before noon, riding into town on the main street. It was larger than Rhyolite, with more permanent structures and a more established feel. Xavier led them directly to the doctor's office, a small building with a painted sign reading Dr. James Chen, physician. The doctor was a serious man in his 40s with dark hair going gray at the temples, and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything. He examined Penelope's feet with gentle efficiency while Xavier waited outside. "You are lucky," Dr. Chen said as he cleaned and rebandaged her wounds. "Another day in this heat, and you would have had serious infection. As it is, you will heal fine if you stay off these feet for at least a week. No walking unless absolutely necessary." "I do not have anywhere to stay," Penelope admitted. "I was living in Rhyolite, but after what happened, the marshal explained the situation. You can stay here for now. I have a room in the back that I use for patients who need supervision. It is not fancy, but it is clean and safe." Relief washed over Penelope. "Thank you, doctor. I can pay. We will worry about that later. Right now you need rest and proper care." Dr. Chen helped her to the back room, which was indeed simple but clean, with a narrow bed and a small window. "I will bring you some broth and bread shortly. In the meantime, sleep if you can." Xavier came in as the doctor left. He looked at the room, then at Penelope, and some of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. "This is good. You will be safe here while I head back to Rhyolite and do what needs doing." The thought of him leaving made Penelope's chest tighten. "How long will you be gone?" "A day, maybe 2. I need to investigate the robbery scene, talk to witnesses, and check on your things at the boarding house. Then I need to send wires, get the word out about the Burns brothers and the rest of the gang." Xavier moved closer to the bed. "But I will come back, I promise you that." "Why?" The word came out before Penelope could stop it. "Why do you care so much? You do not even know me." Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. "I do not know," he said finally, "but I do care. From the moment I saw you lying in that desert, something just clicked, like I was supposed to be there, like you were supposed to." He broke off, shaking his head. "Maybe I am not making sense. It has been a long couple of days. You are making perfect sense." Penelope reached out and took his hand, the first time she had initiated touch between them. His hand was warm and calloused, strong and steady. "I feel it too. I thought maybe it was just because you saved me, but it is more than that. I cannot explain it either." Xavier's fingers tightened around hers. "I need to go do my job, but when I come back, if you are willing, I would like to spend more time with you, get to know you properly. See if this thing between us is real or just a moment born of danger and circumstance." "I would like that very much," Penelope whispered. Xavier lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that it made her heart ache. "Rest now. Get strong. I will be back before you know it." Then he was gone, and Penelope was left alone with her thoughts and the lingering warmth where his lips had touched her skin. The next 2 days passed slowly. Dr. Chen proved to be a kind and attentive caregiver, bringing Penelope meals and checking her feet regularly. The swelling went down and the wounds began to heal, though they were still too tender for walking. Penelope spent her time resting and thinking about Xavier, wondering where he was and what he was doing, worrying that something might happen to him. Late on the second evening, she heard the sound of a horse outside and then voices in the front office. Her heart leaped. A moment later, Xavier appeared in her doorway, dusty and tired but whole and healthy. The relief that flooded through Penelope was so intense it nearly made her cry. "You came back," she said unnecessarily. "I said I would." Xavier stepped into the room, closing the door behind him for privacy. "I have news, some good and some less so." He pulled up a chair next to her bed and sat down heavily. "The good news is I found your money at the boarding house. It was right where you said it would be. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, she sends her regards and said to tell you she is praying for your recovery." He pulled a small pouch from his pocket and placed it on the table beside her bed. "I also sent wires to every lawman within 100 miles. The Delaney gang is officially wanted, and there are deputies and marshals looking for them all over Nevada and California." "What is the bad news?" Xavier's expression darkened. "The gang knows you are alive. One of the Burns brothers, probably Charlie, was seen in Rhyolite yesterday asking about you. They know you got away and they are looking. I do not think they will find you here, not quickly anyway, but it means you are still in danger." Fear curled in Penelope's stomach. "What should I do?" "I have been thinking about that." Xavier leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "The safest thing would be to get you far away from here, somewhere the gang will not think to look. Carson City would work. I have friends there, people who could keep an eye on you while I finish hunting down these bastards. How long would that take? Could be weeks, could be months. These things are not predictable." Xavier ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I hate the idea of you being alone and afraid all that time, constantly looking over your shoulder. You have been through enough." "Then what is the alternative?" Xavier met her eyes. "You stay with me. I keep you close while I track the gang. It is more dangerous in some ways, but at least I could protect you directly, and you would not be alone." Penelope's heart began to beat faster. "Would that not interfere with your work? Maybe, probably, but I have done harder things." His voice softened. "These past 2 days, all I could think about was getting back to you, making sure you were all right, and I realized something. I do not want to send you away. I want you with me, even if it complicates everything. Xavier, I know we just met. I know this is crazy. but I have been doing this job long enough to trust my gut, and my gut says you and I are supposed to be together." He reached out and took her hand. "I am not saying we rush into anything. I am just saying give this a chance. Stay with me. Let us see where this goes." Penelope looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw hope there, and uncertainty, and something deeper that made her breath catch. This man who had given her his boots and his horse, who had protected her and cared for her, who looked at her like she mattered more than anything in the world. How could she say no? "Yes," she said simply. "I will stay with you." The smile that broke across Xavier's face was like the sun rising. He stood and leaned down, and for a moment Penelope thought he might kiss her. But instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture of promise and restraint that somehow meant more than a kiss would have. "We will leave as soon as Dr. Chen says you are fit to travel," Xavier said. "Until then, I am staying right here in Beatty. I already rented a room at the hotel. I will check in on you every day." True to his word, Xavier visited Penelope every morning and evening for the next 5 days while her feet healed. He brought her books to read and food from the hotel restaurant that was better than the plain broth Dr. Chen offered. They talked for hours, sharing more of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Penelope learned that Xavier had a dry sense of humor that could make her laugh even when she was frustrated with her confinement. Xavier discovered that Penelope could be surprisingly stubborn when she set her mind to something, and that she had strong opinions about everything from politics to literature. With every conversation, Penelope fell a little more. She found herself noticing small things about Xavier. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the patient way he listened when she talked, the unconscious protectiveness in how he positioned himself in a room, always between her and the door. She had never felt this way about anyone before, this combination of attraction and respect and simple joy in another person's company. On the 5th evening, Dr. Chen declared her fit to travel. "Your feet are healing well," he said. "You can walk now, though I would not recommend long distances for at least another week. Take it easy, and if you see any sign of infection, get to a doctor immediately." That night, after the doctor left, Xavier and Penelope sat together in the fading light of her small room. There was a tension in the air now, an awareness that they were about to embark on something significant together. "Are you afraid?" Xavier asked quietly. "A little," Penelope admitted. "But more than that, I am ready. I do not want to hide anymore. I want to live, even if that means taking risks." "I will do everything in my power to keep you safe," Xavier said. "You have my word on that. I know you will. I trust you, Xavier." He reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I am going to catch them, Penelope. Every last one of them. For Samuel, for you, for every other person they have hurt. And when I do, you will finally be free of this fear." "We will be free," Penelope corrected softly. "Both of us, to see where this goes without danger hanging over our heads." Xavier leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Penelope did not want to pull away. She wanted this more than she had wanted anything in a long time. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and searching, a question and an answer all at once. Penelope's hand came up to rest against Xavier's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, and she felt that warmth in her chest bloom into something bigger, something that felt like the beginning of love. When they finally parted, both of them were breathing hard. Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to do right by you," he whispered. "I swear it." "I know," Penelope whispered back. "I know you will." They left Beatty at dawn the next morning, riding together on Buck with Xavier behind Penelope in the saddle, his arms around her as he held the reins. It was the closest they had been physically, and Penelope was acutely aware of the solid warmth of his body against her back, the strength of his arms on either side of her. She felt safe and cared for, and something more, something that made her skin tingle and her heart race. Their destination was a small town called Goldfield, about 30 miles northwest of Beatty. Xavier had received word that the Delaney gang had been spotted in the area, and he wanted to investigate while the trail was still warm. It would take them most of the day to reach Goldfield, and Xavier planned to stop frequently to rest Penelope's feet. They made good time through the morning, following rough trails through the desert landscape. The July heat was oppressive, but they had plenty of water now, and Xavier kept them moving at a steady pace that would not tire Buck too much. They talked as they rode, comfortable now in each other's presence. Xavier pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area. Penelope leaned back against him and let herself enjoy the journey, the adventure of it all. Around noon, they stopped to rest in the shade of some rocks. Xavier helped Penelope down from the saddle and checked her feet, which were doing well in a pair of proper shoes he had purchased for her in Beatty. They ate jerky and biscuits and shared a canteen of water, sitting side by side on a flat rock. "Can I ask you something?" Penelope said after a while. "Anything. When we catch the gang, when all this is over, what happens then? I mean, what happens to us?" Xavier was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I have been thinking about that a lot. My work takes me all over. I am never in one place for long." "That is not much of a life for someone else to join." Penelope's heart sank. "So you think we should part ways when this is done?" "No." Xavier turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "No, that is not what I think at all. I think I need to figure out a way to make this work, because the idea of not having you in my life anymore is unbearable." "What if I do not mind traveling?" Penelope said. "What if I would rather be with you, wherever you are, than settled somewhere without you?" "You would give up stability like that, the chance to put down roots." "I have not had roots in years, Xavier. What I have been doing is surviving, not living. But with you, I feel alive again. I feel like maybe I could have something real, something worth holding on to." She took his hand. "I am not saying it would be easy, but I am saying I want to try." Xavier brought her hand to his lips and kissed her palm. "You are remarkable, you know that. I am practical. There is a difference." He laughed and pulled her close, kissing her properly. This kiss was different from the one in the doctor's office, less tentative and more sure. It spoke of possibility and promise, of two people finding each other against all odds and deciding to hold on tight. They reached Goldfield as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and crimson. The town was bustling with activity, full of miners and businessmen and all the chaos that came with a gold strike. Xavier found them a small but respectable hotel and got 2 adjoining rooms, preserving Penelope's reputation while still keeping her close. Over dinner in the hotel restaurant, Xavier laid out his plan. "I will spend tomorrow asking around, seeing if anyone has seen the gang or knows where they might be hiding. I want you to stay in the hotel, keep the door locked. Do not open it for anyone but me." "I want to help," Penelope protested. "You are helping by staying safe." "I cannot do my job if I am worried about you every second." Xavier's voice was firm but gentle. "I know you are not the kind of woman who likes being coddled, and I respect that. But in this case, I need you to trust that I know what I am doing." Penelope wanted to argue, but she could see the sense in what he was saying. "All right, but you have to promise to be careful." "I promise." The next morning, Xavier left early. Penelope stayed in her room as instructed, trying to occupy herself with the books Xavier had bought her and the view from her window of the busy street below. The day dragged on endlessly. Every time she heard footsteps in the hall, her heart would leap, hoping it was Xavier returning. But he did not come back until after dark, and when he did, his expression was grim. "I found them," he said without preamble. "Or at least, I found where they have been staying, an abandoned mining camp about 5 miles east of here. One of the local prospectors saw 3 men matching the Burns brothers' description heading that way 2 days ago." "What are you going to do?" "I am going out there at first light with the local sheriff and his deputy. We are going to try to take them peacefully, but if they resist—" Xavier's jaw tightened. "Well, we will do what we have to do." Fear gripped Penelope's heart. "They will resist. Men like that always do. Probably, but I have faced worse odds." Xavier sat down next to her on the bed and took both her hands in his. "I need you to know something, just in case." "If anything happens to me tomorrow, do not," Penelope interrupted, her voice sharp with fear. "Do not say things like that. You are going to be fine. Probably. But in this line of work you never know, and I need you to hear this." Xavier's eyes were serious, searching hers. "Meeting you changed something in me, Penelope. For the first time in years, I have something to look forward to beyond the next arrest, the next chase. You make me want to think about the future, about what comes after, about building a life instead of just surviving from day to day." Tears pricked at Penelope's eyes. "You are saying goodbye." "I am saying I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a week. But it is true. I love you, and I needed you to know that before I ride out tomorrow." A sob escaped Penelope's throat, and then she was in Xavier's arms, clinging to him. "I love you too," she said against his chest. "I love you, and you better come back to me, Xavier Wright, because I am not done with you yet." Xavier held her tight, his face buried in her hair. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, taking comfort in physical presence and shared warmth. Eventually, Xavier pulled back just enough to kiss her, and this kiss was different from all the others. It was desperate and claiming, full of all the things they had not yet had time to say or do. Penelope kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her fear and love and hope into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I should go to my own room. If I stay here much longer, I am not going to want to leave." "Then do not leave. Stay with me tonight. Not for anything improper, just stay. I need to know you are close." Xavier hesitated only a moment before nodding. He removed his gun belt and his boots, then lay down on top of the covers with Penelope curled against his side, her head on his chest. They talked quietly for a while, making plans for the future, dreaming out loud about what their life together might look like. Eventually, Penelope drifted off to sleep, lulled by the steady rhythm of Xavier's heartbeat beneath her ear. When she woke in the gray light of pre-dawn, Xavier was gone. There was a note on the pillow beside her, written in his bold handwriting. "Did not want to wake you. I will be back by noon. Wait for me. All my love, X." Penelope clutched the note to her chest and prayed harder than she ever had in her life. The morning passed with agonizing slowness. Penelope tried to eat breakfast but could not stomach more than a few bites. She paced her room until her feet ached, then sat by the window and watched the street. Noon came and went with no sign of Xavier. Then 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. By 3, Penelope was nearly sick with worry. At 3:30, she finally heard commotion in the street below. She pressed her face to the window and saw a group of riders coming into town. She recognized the local sheriff, his deputy, and Xavier bringing up the rear. Her heart soared with relief until she noticed Xavier was slumped in his saddle, and there was blood on his shirt. Penelope ran from the room, not bothering with her shoes or her hat, just flying down the stairs and out into the street. By the time she reached the group, Xavier was being helped down from his horse by the deputy. "Xavier," she cried, pushing through the small crowd that had gathered. He looked up at the sound of her voice, and despite the obvious pain in his eyes, he smiled. "I am all right. It is just a graze." "You are bleeding," Penelope said, her voice shaking. "Barely. I have had worse." The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Carson, gave Penelope a sympathetic look. "He is telling the truth, miss. The bullet just creased his side. He will be sore for a while, but he will live." "We got them," Xavier said, wincing as the deputy helped him toward the doctor's office. "All three Burns brothers, Charlie and Frank, are in custody. Pete did not make it. He drew on us and the sheriff had to shoot." "What about the rest of the gang?" Penelope asked, walking alongside Xavier, her hand gripping his arm. "Still out there, but the Burns brothers are talking. They want deals. By tomorrow, we will know where Delaney and the others are hiding." Xavier looked down at her, his eyes warm despite the pain. "It is almost over, Penelope. You are almost free." The local doctor, a harried-looking man named Dr. Phillips, cleaned and bandaged Xavier's wound, confirming that it was indeed superficial. The bullet had carved a shallow furrow across his ribs, painful but not dangerous. He prescribed rest and clean bandages, then sent them on their way. Back at the hotel, Penelope helped Xavier to his room and made him lie down on the bed. She sat beside him, her hand in his, just grateful he was alive and whole. "You scared me," she said quietly. "I scared myself a little," Xavier admitted. "When Pete drew on us, I thought I was fast enough to get out of the way. Turns out I was not quite as fast as I thought." "Please do not joke about this." Xavier squeezed her hand. "I am sorry, you are right. It could have been much worse." He pulled her down to lie beside him, carefully arranging them so she would not hurt his wound. But it was not. "I am here, and so are you, and we are one step closer to ending this." Over the next 2 days, the situation resolved itself faster than anyone expected. The Burns brothers, facing hanging for murder and robbery, gave up everything they knew about Jack Delaney and the rest of the gang. It turned out Delaney was holed up in an abandoned ranch near the California border with only 2 other men. The sheriff organized a larger posse, including marshals from 2 neighboring territories, and they rode out to make the arrest. Xavier wanted to go with them, but his wound kept him in Goldfield. He chafed at the forced inactivity, but Penelope was secretly grateful. She had seen him hurt once. She did not need to see it again. The posse returned 3 days later with Delaney and his remaining men in chains. There had been a brief shootout, but no lawmen were injured, and the outlaws had surrendered when they realized they were hopelessly outnumbered. It was over. The gang that had terrorized Nevada and California for months was finally behind bars. Xavier received word by telegram a week later that the Burns brothers and Delaney would all stand trial in Carson City within the month. His testimony would be needed, as would Penelope's. After that, they would be free to go wherever they wanted, do whatever they chose. The night after receiving the telegram, Xavier took Penelope for a walk through Goldfield's Main Street. His wound had healed enough that he could move without too much pain, and the evening air was cooler than the brutal daytime heat. They walked hand in hand, enjoying the bustle of the town and each other's company. "I have been thinking about the future," Xavier said as they paused to look at the sunset painting the distant mountains purple and gold. "About what I want my life to look like." "And what do you want?" Penelope asked. "I want you. That is the easy part. The harder part is figuring out how to give you the life you deserve." Xavier turned to face her fully. "I have money saved, not a lot, but some. Enough to buy a small place somewhere, maybe start a horse ranch like my father had. I could still do some lawman work, consulting or deputizing when needed, but I would not be on the trail constantly. We could have a real home, Penelope. A real life. Penelope's heart swelled. Are you asking me to marry you, Xavier Wright? I am doing a terrible job of it, but yes. That is what I am asking. Xavier reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. I bought this in Beatty before we left, just in case. It is not fancy, but it is real gold, and it is a promise. Marry me, Penelope. Build a life with me. I cannot promise it will always be easy, but I can promise I will love you and protect you and do everything in my power to make you happy. Tears were streaming down Penelope's face now, but she was smiling. Yes, yes, of course I will marry you. Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, not caring who might be watching. Penelope kissed him back with all the love in her heart, this man who had given her not just his boots and his horse, but his heart and his future. They were married a month later in Carson City, after the trial concluded with guilty verdicts for all the gang members. It was a small ceremony with only a handful of friends and colleagues present, but it was perfect. Penelope wore a simple white dress purchased from a local seamstress, and Xavier wore his best suit with his marshal's badge polished to a shine. They spoke their vows in a small church as the late August sun streamed through the windows, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed Penelope like he never wanted to stop. They spent their wedding night in the best hotel Carson City had to offer, finally consummating the love that had been building between them since that first day in the desert. Xavier was gentle and patient with Penelope, making sure her first time was full of tenderness and care. They lay together afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, talking quietly about their plans and their dreams. True to his word, Xavier used his savings to purchase a small property in the foothills outside Carson City. It had a modest house, a barn, and enough land to raise horses. Xavier took a position as a consulting marshal, which meant he could work from home most of the time, only traveling when absolutely necessary. Penelope set up a piano in the parlor and began giving lessons to local children, finally able to share her love of music in a way that felt meaningful. Their life was not always easy. Money was sometimes tight, and there were occasions when Xavier had to go out on longer assignments that left Penelope worried and lonely. But they built something real together, something solid and lasting. They learned each other's rhythms, their quirks and habits. They fought sometimes, usually about Xavier taking unnecessary risks or Penelope working too hard, but they always made up, remembering how precious their time together was. 2 years after their wedding, Penelope gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Samuel after the man who had been killed in the robbery that brought them together. Samuel had Xavier's dark hair and Penelope's green eyes, and he was the light of their lives. Xavier proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving in ways that sometimes brought tears to Penelope's eyes. 3 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Grace. She had Xavier's blue eyes and Penelope's stubborn streak, and she kept them both on their toes from the moment she could walk. The house rang with laughter and music, with the sounds of children playing and horses whinnying in the pasture. Xavier continued his work as a marshal, though he took fewer and fewer dangerous assignments as the years passed. His reputation as a lawman was solid, and he was able to do meaningful work, consulting on cases and training younger deputies, without putting himself in constant danger. Penelope's music lessons grew into a small but thriving business, and she occasionally played at local events and church services. On their 5th anniversary, Xavier and Penelope sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant colors. Samuel was playing with a stick horse in the yard while Grace napped inside. It was a peaceful moment, the kind that had once seemed impossible during those desperate days in the desert. "You ever think about that day?" Penelope asked, her head resting on Xavier's shoulder. "When you found me running through the desert all the time," Xavier said. "Best day of my life, even though neither of us knew it at the time. I was so scared. I thought I was going to die out there. Instead, you found me, or I found you, however you want to look at it." Xavier pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I gave you my boots and my horse, and you gave me a reason to stop wandering and start living. We gave each other a future," Penelope said softly. "A real future, not just survival. The best future I could have imagined." Xavier tightened his arm around her. "I love you, Penelope Wright, more today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "I love you too," Penelope whispered, her heart full to bursting. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. The desert had tested them, but it had also brought them together, and for that, they would always be grateful. Years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. Samuel grew into a serious young man who loved horses as much as his father did, and Grace became a talented pianist who sometimes accompanied her mother during lessons. Xavier's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Penelope noticed laugh lines around her eyes that had not been there before. They were aging together, growing into their life with grace and contentment. When Samuel was 15 and Grace was 12, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise that delighted and terrified them both in equal measure. Xavier was 42 now, Penelope 39, and they had assumed their family was complete. But their third child, another boy they named James, arrived healthy and strong, bringing new energy into their home. The children loved hearing the story of how their parents met, though Xavier and Penelope edited some of the more frightening details when they were young. As they grew older, they told the full truth about the danger and the violence, but also about the courage and the love that had emerged from those dark days. "You gave Mom your boots?" Samuel asked once, when he was 17 and beginning to court a girl from town. "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard." "It seemed practical at the time," Xavier said with a smile. "But yes, I suppose it was romantic too." "It was the moment I started falling in love with him," Penelope added, reaching over to squeeze Xavier's hand. "Not because of the boots themselves, but because of what they represented. Here was a man who would literally give me the shoes off his feet to keep me safe and comfortable. How could I not love someone like that?" Grace sighed dreamily. "I want someone to love me like that someday." "You will," Xavier said firmly. "But he better be worthy of you or he will answer to me." The children laughed, but Penelope knew Xavier meant every word. He was fiercely protective of their family, of the life they had built together, and she loved him all the more for it. On their 20th anniversary, Xavier and Penelope took a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children with trusted friends. They rode out into the desert, to the approximate spot where Xavier had found Penelope all those years ago. The landscape had not changed much. It was still harsh and beautiful, still unforgiving to those who did not respect it. They dismounted and stood together, looking out at the endless expanse of sand and rock. "Hard to believe so much changed in one day," Penelope said. "Best decision I ever made, riding toward those gunshots instead of away from them," Xavier said. He pulled Penelope close, his arms around her waist. "You know what I think about sometimes? What would have happened if I had gone a different direction that day? If I had been 10 minutes slower, or if I had decided the gunshots were not my problem. But you did not. You came for me, I came for you, Xavier agreed. And you chose to stay with me, even when you had every reason to run in the opposite direction. We chose each other, Penelope. Against all odds, we found each other and held on tight. And I would do it again, Penelope said, turning in his arms to face him. Every single time in every possible life I would choose you. Xavier kissed her then, deep and long, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying happy tears. They had been through so much together, weathered so many storms, but their love had only grown stronger with time. They were partners in the truest sense, equals who had built something beautiful from a moment of desperation and courage. They returned home as the sun was setting, riding together on Xavier's horse, just as they had done so many years before. When they arrived, they found their children had prepared a surprise anniversary dinner, the table laden with all their favorite foods. James, now 7 years old, presented them with a drawing he had made of them on horseback, and Grace played a special piece on the piano she had composed just for the occasion. Samuel gave a toast that was so heartfelt and mature that both Penelope and Xavier had to wipe away tears. That night, lying in bed with Xavier's arms around her, Penelope reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. She had started as a terrified young woman running barefoot through the desert, certain she was going to die. She had been saved by a cowboy who gave her his boots and his horse, and in doing so, gave her his heart. From those desperate moments had grown a love story for the ages, a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger each time. "What are you thinking about?" Xavier murmured, his voice drowsy. "How lucky I am, how grateful. I am the lucky one." "We are both lucky," Penelope corrected. "We found each other and we built this beautiful life. Not everyone gets that." "No," Xavier agreed, pulling her closer. "Not everyone does. We are blessed, you and I, more than we probably deserve. I love you, Xavier Wright, today, tomorrow, and every day after. I love you too, Penelope Wright, always and forever." They drifted off to sleep together, comfortable and content in the life they had created. Outside, the Nevada night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. The desert that had nearly claimed Penelope's life had instead given her the greatest gift imaginable: true love, true partnership, and a future bright with promise. As the years continued to roll by, their love story became something of a legend in the area. When Samuel married at 23 and Grace at 20, both of them chose partners who reminded Xavier and Penelope of themselves. Good, honest people with kind hearts and strong principles. James, the youngest, showed early signs of following in his father's footsteps, fascinated by law and justice and the idea of helping people. Xavier eventually retired from marshal work entirely when he turned 55, content to focus on the horse ranch and spending time with his growing family. By then, Samuel had given them 2 grandchildren, and Grace was expecting her first. The house that had once been just for 2 now overflowed with family gatherings and celebrations, with the laughter of children and the warmth of love. On their 30th anniversary, Xavier and Penelope sat once again on their porch, this time watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Xavier's hair was fully gray now, and Penelope's auburn had faded to a softer shade with threads of silver running through it. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had fallen in love in the desert all those years ago. The young woman who had run barefoot through the sand, the cowboy who had given her his boots and his horse. 30 years, Penelope marveled. How did we get here so fast? I do not know, but I would not change a single day of it, Xavier said. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the gold band she still wore, now worn smooth from 3 decades of wear. You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. And you are still a terrible liar, Penelope teased, but I love you for saying it anyway. I am not lying. You are beautiful, more so now than when I first met you, because I know everything that makes you who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your stubborn refusal to give up even when things are hard. That is beautiful, Penelope. That is what I see when I look at you. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, moved as always by Xavier's ability to say exactly what she needed to hear. How did I get so lucky to find you? We found each other, Xavier corrected gently. And we chose to hold on. That is what matters, not luck but choice. Every day we choose each other. Every day we choose this life. And I will keep choosing it, choosing you, for as long as I have breath in my body. Me too, Penelope whispered. Always. They sat together as the sun set over their beloved Nevada home, surrounded by the family they had built and the life they had created. It had all started with a desperate run through the desert, with boots given and a horse shared. It had grown into something more magnificent than either of them could have imagined. A love that had stood the test of time, that had weathered hardship and danger and emerged triumphant. They had built a legacy of kindness and courage, of choosing love even when it seemed impossible. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Xavier and Penelope Wright sat hand in hand, grateful for every moment they had been given together, and looking forward to all the moments still to come. Their story, which had begun with such fear and uncertainty, had become one of hope and joy and enduring love. It was, in every way that mattered, a happily ever after.